Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're very excited to have you here. I'm just going to give a bit more time for people to join, but while you're joining, you can go ahead and just write in the chat maybe your first name and then where you're joining from. You actually get to see your first name. So where you're joining from and let's say your role. Someone from Athens. Okay. So we have some school social workers. Great. Brooklyn. All right. Well, let's get into just a bit of an introduction before we get into our very relevant and important topic for today. So, like I said, welcome in everyone. My name is Chloe, and I'm a marketing associate at August Schools. So, this webinar today is being hosted by August Schools, and then we have Alexis Watson joining us. So, we host webinars each month about different topics that are relevant to a student support team. If you haven't heard of August Schools before, we are a platform built for K-12 schools. And August Schools is a platform where school administrators, nurses, counselors, social workers, learning specialists, athletic directors, so just the whole student support team can come in and document student visits, collaborate together, and produce and review relevant data based on those visits, interactions, and the student's history. So I'm looking forward to getting into this topic for today. And as I said, joining us, we have Alexis Watson today. So Alexis is the Dean of Students at St. Paul's School for the Girls in Maryland. And she serves as the upper school leadership team and oversees all aspects of student life. So Alexis works closely with school leaders, faculty, staff, family, and students to shape a student-centered school culture grounded in clarity, consistency, care, and belonging. You'll hear, how intentional she is with her approach throughout the course of this presentation. She brings a thoughtful and deeply student-focused perspective to the conversation, and we're so glad to have her here with us today. So thank you, Alexis, and over to you.
All right, thank you and welcome everyone. I'm so excited that you all are here. Thank you for that warm introduction. I am going to go ahead and get right into it. Time is very precious, and I want to make sure that I am very respectful of everyone's time. So, from Welcome to Worth, Affirming Identity in PWIs. For those who may not be familiar, PWIs predominantly white institutions, and it's going to be presented by myself, Alexis Watson, today. A little bit of housekeeping. I know that we are not in person. I usually give this workshop or presentation in person, but today it's a little different. So I kind of switched it up a little bit just to make sure that it was very inclusive. So session housekeeping, respect the chat. Let's use the chat, but make sure that we are very respectful for the chat. Share the chat. So I want to hear voices. I can see the chat. I cannot see your faces. But I know you're there because you are texting away on the chat. And experience the chat, hear the chat, be vulnerable in the chat to your comfortability level. But that's really how we are going to interact throughout this time. So please utilize it, and I'll do my best to make sure that I'm checking back at it. All right, moving along. So some of our outcomes, we are going to learn and better understand the difference between welcoming and affirming. Yes, there is a difference between someone being welcomed into the space and being affirmed once they are in the space. We're also going to examine how PWIs can unintentionally, right? This is not a bashing session. They can unintentionally harm students' identity development. We're going to identify some concrete practices that we can do to help affirm students of color daily. There are tiny tidbits that every one of us can do on a daily basis to reinforce affirming students' voices. We're also going to reflect on some personal bias and some institutional habits. Now, this might be a little uncomfortable for folks, but let's try to stretch ourselves, right? Really look inward. No one else can see you. And really think about how a lot of this information is hitting you, and how you respond to some of this information that contributes to your personal bias, or even just identifying some institutional habits that you may be in a position to address and to speak to. And we're going to commit to one actionable shift, right? Or policy for those who are in policy changing positions. We're going to look at how we can commit to one thing, right, that can change the trajectory of students' sense of feeling that they are affirmed in your space. All right. So, how do we move beyond I am welcome to genuine worth? I love this quote that I picked up. Please don't ask me where I picked it up, but I did pick it up along the way of my journey. This is my 16th year in education, so there's a lot of knowledge in there. It is essential to create an environment that allows students of color to feel truly seen and valued. This shift supports their self worth and academic success within PWIs. And we're going to take a look at some data as well that can support that. Students don't need to feel grateful for being allowed to exist in the space. I'll say that part again. Students don't need to feel grateful to for being allowed to exist in a space. They need to feel valued for who they are within the space. It's nothing like going somewhere and someone saying, yeah, you can come, but I need you quiet. I need you not to disrupt. I don't need you to move. I don't need you to be seen or heard. I just need you to stand there. Very uncomfortable feeling that some of our students experience that every single day. All right, so let's get chatting. So we're going to do a quick little think and share. I want to hear from you guys. Have you ever felt welcomed in a space but not affirmed in the space? Think about a space, school, job, community, neighborhood, anywhere where you have been included on the surface, but your full identity wasn't seen or valued. So, for example, you are allowed to come to this particular event, but you must dress this way. Your hair must be this way. You must present a certain type of way in order for you to be in that space. We're going to have selections of yes, often, if that rings a bell to you, that reoccurring feeling of invited but left on the outside of really belonging. Or is it yes, but once in a blue moon, right? So there's a couple of moments and tidbits that you really hold in your brain, but it's not a consistent thing. Are you still trying to figure it out? That's also a thing. I'm not sure how to name what I've experienced. This might be new to you. Some people may have not been in spaces where they can name what that feeling is, and that's okay too. We're going to learn on how to name it too. And not that I can recall. Some may be in spaces and don't feel that they are not being affirmed, and that's okay too. So I would love for that poll to go ahead and run. And I think you all should see that now. Chloe, is that correct?
Yes, so the poll is running now, and just so everyone knows, your answers are going to be anonymous. They'll just be percentages.
Thank you so much. So let's give maybe about 60 more seconds. Really think about it. Your lived experience, no one else's, not in general, not most of the people in your community. I'm just only thinking about self, and being very transparent. And again, I can't see a thing. All I'm going to see is numbers. So please be as transparent as you would like. And I hope everyone's day is going well as well. It's a little chilly here in Maryland. I don't know where everyone's from. I think I seen Georgia down there. How's the weather in Georgia? I hope it's wonderful. Indiana. What's the weather in Indiana? Boston. What's the weather in Boston? All right. So if we are ready, I would love to see that data. Where are most of our folks coming from today? Cold. Okay. And a little warm. I'll take that. I'll take that. Okay. Once or a few times. Thank you to all of those who joined in and completed that poll. So it looks like we all, or not all, but most have experienced this feeling at least once or twice, or have had moments of this feeling that really has stood out to them. Imagine being in a student's preview and they are experiencing these things on a daily basis as children. I'm going to assume that you all have experienced these things as adults, but imagine having to experience this, handle it, process it as a child, with which we know their frontal lobe isn't even fully developed, right? So let's talk through some ways that we can support. But first, here we go. Let's talk about why affirmation matters in education at all, right? So I do have some key research foundations that kind of sets our base for today. Identity and academic outcomes. Students of color who feel their identity is affirmed, there are certain things that show up out of that, right? So higher academic engagement. If I feel that though I am affirmed in my identity, I'm affirmed in being in the space, maybe I will try to go and do more academic challenging things. I'll sign up for those honor classes. People around me are speaking life into me. I'm going to stay later and do all of those things as far as academics. Higher academic engagement is a direct correlation with students feeling like they belong, or that they are affirmed and that they are heard and listened to. Increased sense of belonging in a space too. When I feel comfortable, I perform better. When I feel comfortable, I'm able to show up in any space around the campus and be able to thrive. A greater resilience in diverse places. So it means I can be with my counterparts and not feel as though I'm less than, or that they have a leg up on me, or that they are more privileged than I. When institutions create that space, they get to see students' academics skyrocket. I personally have seen students go from not participating in classes to being fully engaged, raising their hand, because the atmosphere is a space for them to learn and they don't have to think about the color of their skin every time they walk into a space. So, identity and academic outcomes, there are some definite benefits to affirming them in their spaces. PWIs and racial stress, students of color often experience hypervisibility of being the only one. Now let's jump over to the chat, because I do want you guys to talk back to me. If any questions or comments or anything that you have on anything that I'm saying, please drop them in the chat so that we can have this dialogue back and forth. And I'm not just talking to you, but I'm talking with you. Hypervisibility, if those who are not familiar with it, it's really being the only one singled out for representation. So if you ever seen marketing for a PWI, you might have a group of students, right? But there may be one or two that may be of students of color. Being seen during admissions or in the marketing realm, or when there's special events or donors or things like that, being put on the front, being put to be the star of the school to show that there's diversity. However, their culture and their voice is ignored. They're not getting into those honor classes. They're not being able to join programs in certain clubs. They're not getting approved to go inside of those honor classes. So they can be there when it is appropriate, but not when they are there just as students, but more so as showboats, as some people will say. There's also a pressure to assimilate to the dominant norms, wherever the dominant demographic is, you tend to unintentionally, right? We are all talking about this being unintentional. You would want the students to assimilate to whatever the dominant norm is. When you're asking students to do that, you are asking them to get rid of, or to put away, or to hide, or to behave in a manner that does not associate themselves with what their culture is. And understanding that when you are saying their culture, not having a negative indication on what their culture is, which takes me to adult perception, right? That matters. What I think of my students is how I'm going to speak to them. It is what I'm going to pour into them. Little story time. When I was in high school, I had a teacher. I attended a PWI high school my senior year. I had a teacher, math teacher. I will not name her because I believe she is still living her best life. However, she was very mean to me. She spoke very clearly that I was not going to be successful. She did not like that I was in her class. I was a transfer student at the time, and really challenged my capability of doing this said thing. That played on me for a very long time that I am older now, many, many years removed, and I still think of her. I still think of her from time to time, especially when life is amazing. I think about those voices that poured all that negative into me and how I was resilient in getting back to knowing who I was and knowing that I can, and having other adults in the community that would pour into me. I will say this name is White, who was my guidance counselor, who poured into me regularly to counteract that negative interaction. But when you have a perception of a student, you never know how long that student will carry and how much they will believe it. If I am told every day that I will not be successful, do you think that I'll be successful? If that's all that I'm hearing, adults' perception matters in different ways, such as discipline outcomes. Are they being targeted more when it comes to discipline? Are we looking at uniforms a little bit more of our students of color? Are we looking at, are they where they're supposed to be? Do they have something on them that they're not supposed to have? Do we discriminate in our practices and not understand that it's discrimination as an adult? Am I biased? Every adult is able to have whatever political views, whatever religious views that they would like, but it should not do harm to students. And that's, I think, where us adults have to make sure that we are managing our perceptions of our students and our real life experiences and beliefs, and how we project that onto our students. Student self-concept, again, adults play a huge role in the confidence that a child has to do well in school. What you put into a child inevitably is what you're going to get back out. Understanding intent and impact are two totally different things. My intent is to do well by this student, but the impact has harmed, right? I let this student do this said thing, but it impacted them in a negative way. I wanted to help, but the impact was harm. So understanding that sometimes it's not that we are doing the wrong thing, and our intent may be good, but it's important to understand that impact matters. Microaggressions, the intent may have been just to compliment her hair, but the impact was feeling very isolated, and very targeted and called out for something that is very natural on everyone, which is hair. Again, intent versus impact, making sure that institutions know the difference and that they have systems in place in order to address those in real time. Right. All right, just a quote that I like: affirmation is not extra. It does not cost anything. It does not require too much. It is foundational to student success. If I am around and in an environment where people believe, and the culture of the school is the messaging of believing that every single student that walks through that door can be and will be successful and thrive, and here is the space in order for them to do it, then they will be successful. Affirmation is the bare minimum. Bare minimum. All right. So before I keep going, everyone take a virtual deep breath in, virtual deep breath out. One more time, virtual deep breath in, virtual deep breath out. Thank you all for joining me. I want to do a chat check. Is everyone okay? Thumbs up. Is everyone okay? Is everyone doing good? I'll start. Everyone doing good? Everyone's having a good day. We're following along. All right. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Just want to make sure everyone's still on board. All right, we're going to keep moving. The gap, the systematic shortcomings in practice. And if anyone needs me to slow down a little bit, just let me know, or go back or repeat something. Just go ahead and let me know. Drop it in the chat. Be sure to do so. This is teamwork. Teamwork. The gap, systematic shortcomings in practice. And this is how we move from one to the other. All are welcome. Anyone ever hear that before? To you belong here. That's where we want schools to end up and where we want them to go. Cultural celebrations, right? To cultural integrations. Are we only looking at Blacks during Black History Month? That's a celebration. It's a cultural celebration. Or are we integrating history, literature, experiences throughout embedded curriculum? That's different. Diversity statements. We hear them at the top of the year, every year, from our wonderful presidents of institutions, right? We are an inclusive school, all belong here. Let's move towards identity conscious practice, actually implementing things that speak to the actual statements. And representation without power violation. Let's move that to voice, agency, and validation. Some common pitfalls that PWI spaces often do is using language that shows that they are colorblind. I don't see race. Then you can't see me because my race is a part of that. Expecting gratitude for access. You should be lucky you're here. Aren't you a merit scholar? Right? Those are some commentary that as a dean that I've had to address with adults, that we should not be portraying our students to be grateful and to be humble that they are in this space. Celebrating diversity without addressing harm. There's nothing like celebrating a student's culture and their upbringing, but when something happens to them, we are nowhere to be found. We are nowhere to support them. We are not addressing the policies that allow certain things to happen, which brings me down to my next one, which is addressing the incident and not the system. Students and staff alike will do pretty much what they want to do in regards to these types of things if there are no systems in there to say that it's wrong. And when I say a system, a real clear-cut policy needs to be put in place to address the overall, not just one-off incidents. Because when you have one-off incidents, you're putting band-aids on all of those incidents instead of having a holistic system that can speak directly to it. So, welcoming versus affirming, what does that look like in practice? So, all are welcome to you belong here as you are. So, welcoming would sound like posting inclusive slogans on walls and websites, or sharing a general statement about equity at the beginning of the year, expecting students to adapt to the norms or to fit in. We want to move to affirming, where we're naming and validating students' lived experiences throughout our discussions. We're saying you don't have to change who you are to succeed here, which sometimes we do unintentionally. Again, that intent versus impact. Adjusting norms to honor different communication styles and cultures and identities as well. There is not only one way to do something. Differentiated learning happens in classrooms all the time, and differentiated affirming also needs to happen in classrooms all the time. Welcoming versus affirming, what it looks like in practice. Cultural celebrations, moving that to cultural integration. So celebrating Heritage Months with assemblies or hallway displays, it's nice. Hosting one-off cultural events or food days, treating culture as a special occasion. We want to get away from that to more so embedding diverse authors in histories and perspectives all year long. So when it comes to those big events, it doesn't seem performative, and it doesn't seem as though we are just checking off a box of things that we do to support different cultures within the community. Teach it through multiple cultural lenses and representing, and not just cultural lenses, but representing the good of that culture through those lenses as well. Oftentimes we look at the disparity of certain populations or certain cultures instead of the rewards and the attributes that that culture has brought to the main general public. So making sure that we are capturing different kinds of cultures, the good and the bad, is important. And asking whose knowledge is centered daily and not occasionally. Where do we lean in when it comes to culture and food and exposure and life experiences? Where do we lean in, and then where do we lean out? All right, welcoming versus affirming, what it looks like in practice for diversity statements, identity, moving towards identity cautious practice. So, welcoming, that's a public diversity, equity, and inclusion statements. That's mission language that emphasizes inclusion without accountability. To say that as someone is included without having a system for accountability is counterintuitive. Professional development that is optional. Right? Oh, you can do this thing, but we're really not going to hold you to a standard. We're really not going to hold you accountable on if you do it or if you don't. We're not going to tie it to any type of performance training or performance observation. So therefore, it seems again very performative. Again, just checking off a box to say we did something, but not did it with fidelity that it should be done. Affirming is in adults naming race, culture, and identity directly in teaching and in leadership. Bold move, but not impossible if that's what an institution truly wants to do. Using data to deregulate race to inform decisions. I personally do this in practice. When you survey a bunch of students and say, how are you feeling with this current culture and climate of the school? You might get 80% of the girls that say, I love it. It's amazing. But if you dial it down, but have you asked the students of color how they have experienced this space? Those numbers can be drastically different, right? So if 80% says that it's good, then you go down to that subgroup, that can maybe be only 3%. So really make sure that you are looking at data through a variety of different lenses. It was very important. Regularly examining policies. To make sure that they are impactful. They don't just hold, well, we want to, right? The intent is that this policy helps to support a student. How do we move that from an intent that we have to this is the impact that matches the intent? We intend to support and cover our students, and our impact is just that. Right. Representation without power, moving that towards voice agency and validation. Welcoming is hiring a diverse staff without any decision making authority. So they can't really necessarily do anything or provoke change, but they are there to serve as a representation. Student diversity councils that advise but do not influence outcomes. So I can sit on the board, but I do not have a voice in what the decision making is. Featuring students of color in marketing materials only. Again, that one's a little self explanatory. But how do we move all those things to affirming? Students and adults of color helping shape the curriculum, the policy, and the social norms to ensure that all students' voices are seen and heard and affirmed throughout the school norms. Adults acting on students' feedback and naming resulting changes. As a dean, this is something that I have to see quite often, unfortunately, as students giving feedback about different things and actual change happening. You would think it would be so simple, but it's not. I really lean on the policies and the structures and the systems that guide those decisions. Are they in place, and do they speak to what the real issue and the real harm is? And creating leadership pathways where students' identities and assets are assets and not obstacles. It's not an extra thing to think about students of color. It's not extra. It is on trend to be exactly what is supposed to be done because all of our learners are different. And we should be making sure that we affirm them all in different ways. All right. I'm doing a lot of talking. So now we are going to have another quick poll. I want to hear from you. In your classroom right now, classroom or community or leadership team, whichever space that you all are coming to this from, which affirmation practice are you consistently doing right now? You can only pick one. So pick the one that really speaks to where you are right now in your regular practice. So I culturally relevant texts and examples from my students' community. Curriculum reflects students' racial and cultural identities, if this is something that you do regularly. If you explicitly name and push back on racial bias when it appears in your space, including in text, right? Do we shy away from things that are in different books, student comments, or institutional policies, not just being general biases, right? Do we speak to that at all? I've learned and consistently use students' correct names and pronouns, right? Would you fancy yourself as someone who consistently does that and is very intentional about honoring students in that way? Do you create space for students to bring their full identities into the learning environment, whether it be through assignments or discussions or projects? Have you had at least one real conversation with anyone, any students in your space this year about race? Not diversity month, not when something big happens, not when there's a tragic incident, but just in general, intentional conversation about race in your spaces. And being honest, you're not sure. That's why you're here at the workshop, trying to figure it all out. You care deeply, but maybe you just don't know exactly how to do that and are looking for some guidance. So let's go ahead and take a couple of minutes, read through, and let me see those poll results. All right, we'll give it about 10 more seconds. Okay. All right. So we do have some results. Let's take a deep dive. I've learned and consistently use. Okay. And then honestly, I'm not sure. Thank you for your transparency. I like to see that you all are having conversations and you have learned, and that you all are honest about not being sure. That's why you're here. Thank you all for participating. I truly appreciate that. All right, we are on the final little stretch. All right, so I do have 4 pillars of identity affirmation. So when we're talking about affirmation, there is a framework that I've created or put together, more so to speak. These concepts are widely used, but kind of just putting them all together on these are some frameworks that you all can implement to show affirmation. Visibility. Students need to see themselves reflected in the curriculum, in the leadership, in the classroom examples, not just during Heritage Month. I cannot say that enough. As a student who attended a PWI, there's nothing like only being acknowledged a handful of times a year, but not seeing yourself in anything else that has to do with your learning. It is important for you all to make sure that the learning that they have aligns with all cultures, and that you're able to speak to if someone challenges, right? If there's dialogue in your classroom, that's okay. That's okay. We need to talk more about these things. Things that the educator can do is audit your syllabi. Where does students of color show up in your syllabi? Do they at all? Text, visuals, who is centered, and then who do you have to add on? That's a good place to start. When you look at your curriculum and you say, hey, students of color, where are they? That means you have to add them on. Let's take a deeper look at what that syllabi could include to be more diverse. Validation, naming race and culture without discomfort. That's something that everyone is different on. I do challenge folks, if they're not comfortable with having those conversations, to have one-on-ones with people of color, to get that education, to go to things like this, to do workshops, to do seminar. Ignorance is not bliss. Learn that is very important for our students, because when I feel validated, it gives me an internal permission to be my best self. Educators using language like what you are experiencing makes sense given the context. Just being able to acknowledge and affirm someone's feeling is important. That's empathy. If you ask me, we don't have enough of it these days, but empathy, being able to just empathize with what they're saying and put yourselves in those shoes, validation matters. Voice and agency. Students of color are contributors, not just consumers. Feedback shapes policies, not just listening sessions. If you are going to take data, like I stated before, don't just say we did a survey just to do a survey. How are you actively using the data that you have been given to create structures where students feel that they are visible and they are seen and that they are a part of the community? Protection and accountability, swift, clear response. If anything happens, what is your clear, quick response to it? What does your policy say? You adults should move from shifting from, oh, we are investigating this incident, to we are going to address the impact. You may not intend it to do harm, but you did do harm. We need to pay attention to the person in which you did harm to, just as much as we pay attention to the person who did the harm. Oftentimes, in administration, and speaking from a dean, we lean into who caused the harm as opposed to who actually was harmed. And that's a shift that admin should do and lean into, making sure that we are addressing impact, even if a student says, oh, I didn't mean to. Okay. But how do we address now what has been done? All right, deep breath in, virtual deep breath out. I hope you all have wonderful tea and coffee too today. Deep breath in, deep breath out. We're going to do my fave, which is a good old case study. All right. We're going to do it a little differently. Like I said, I typically do this in person. But we are going to try this thing out on this webinar, and I'm going to have you all lean into a poll. There is no right, there is no wrong. This is 100% your opinion. I do want you all to just think about it just a little bit. Make sure you're choosing the best answer that aligns with you. So, case study is affirming students of color in PWI space scenarios. A Black student reports feeling uncomfortable after repeated comments about their hair from their peers and a teacher calling it a distraction. This has happened more than once across different classroom periods. The student came to you. Again, the student came to you. They didn't go to HR. They didn't go to someone else. They didn't go to the dean. If you're not the dean, they didn't go there. They came to you. Also, the teacher who made the comment is also a well-liked and has no prior complaints. That is our case scenario. So there's a couple of questions that I'm going to ask, and I want us to answer those based on this particular scenario. So first up, when the student tells you this, what is your honest first move? Not the right answer, your real instinct in the moment. Is it to listen fully, then ask what they need from you, hold space before deciding anything, and let them lead? Or do you reassure them it will be addressed, communicate that it is serious, and you'll act on it? Do you start thinking about how to talk to the teacher? Your mind goes to adult conversation that needs to happen, or feel uncertain about how to respond at all. That's a thing too. You care deeply, but you don't have a clear script in the moment. We'll take a few minutes, and I want your honest feedback. All right, we have 9 responses. Can I get a couple more? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I will go ahead and change that answer. Thank you for feedback. All right. So we'll go ahead and take a look at some of those answers. Yes. Good. This is one of the higher answers. Again, there's no right or wrong. However, fully listening is always going to be encouraged. Sometimes students do not want us to act immediately. Sometimes they just need to talk through what they're feeling. And sometimes what they're feeling isn't maybe what you assume that they're feeling. Allow them the space to get it out. Allow them to lead the conversation. Be a support for them, but also think through how you can support them on a more administrative or an adult level. But in that moment, listen for how they are asking to be supported. All right, let's do another quick one. Oops, let's see, move the poll. All right, question 2. What do you call this situation when you think about it or describe it to a colleague? The words we use shape the urgency we assign and the response we design. So, 1, would you frame it as a racial incident? It involves race. That's what makes it what it is. Or a microaggression, a specific documented pattern of harm targeting Black identity. Is it a misunderstanding or insensitivity? Probably unintentional. The teacher meant no harm. A dress code of conduct issue. The school has policies. This is an implementation question. So when you are thinking about communicating this to other adults or describing it to other colleagues, what words or frame would you put this in? Let's take a couple seconds and go ahead and fill out that poll. Absolutely. They do need to leave. And sometimes they don't need us to resolve anything. Thank you for your feedback. Appreciate that. All right. Just a few more seconds. Let's go ahead. See if we can see some of those results. All right. A microaggression. And again, not a right or wrong answer. Microaggression would align, but a racial incident would align as well. And again, a misunderstanding and insensitivity, depending on if you know the parties that are involved, that can also be the case as well. But think about the impact, right? So when we're thinking about how that impacted that particular student, they may not have thought it was a misunderstanding. All right. Last but not least. All right. If this teacher is someone you like and respect, how does that change your response? Be honest with yourself. If it is bestie, right? Or if this is your best bud, this is where most systems quietly fail students because of the relationships that us adults sometimes have. So one, it doesn't. The student experience is the same regardless of the relationship. The teacher is irrelevant to what needs to happen. Two, does it change your tone? My approach to them as a partner, not as a problem. I can address this directly and collaborative because I trust that we have with the person. Or is it three? It will probably slow you down, even if it does not, even if you don't want it to. Be honest with yourself. And number four, it makes it more hopeful that they'll receive the feedback well. People want to know that they have caused harm. So again, let's take a look and see what response would best represent your perspective on it. All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap that up. It doesn't. Now, that is a great answer. Again, there's no right or wrong. I'm showing my bias because I do believe, regardless of relationship, if a student is in harm's way, whether it be mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, it does not matter our colleague relationship rapport. That harm must be addressed. And that can be a simple conversation one-on-one. That can be a conversation with HR, but that does need to be addressed with the teacher at the appropriate time with the appropriate individuals. Thank you all for doing those polls. I appreciate the engagement. All right, we're moving right along, almost done. So just some how-tos, quick little guides for teachers, daily practices that you guys can do. Learn the correct pronunciation of names every time. Interrupt bias in real time. See something, say something. Normalize multiple ways of knowing and expressing intelligence. People learn in different ways. They express in different ways. Having a differentiated framework on how students are able to express themselves is important. Avoid asking students of color to explain racism, right? Again, that's that showboating or that show pony that we have to get away from with our students of color in PWI institutions. For administrators, data. Don't just send a survey. Make sure that you are really acting on the data and that you are looking at all the subgroups in your data. You may have 80% of the students of your community may be thriving. Break that down. What is the percentage of students of color? What is your percentage of students that are a part of the LGBTQ plus community? Break that data all the way down. And it can be very telling for some some communities. Examine discipline through a racial equity lens. Invest on ongoing adult learning, not just one-off PDs. Publicly name values and model them. You can have a value, but you can also not embody that value. Make sure that the values that you have are truly being embodied across the community, not just in one-off classrooms, but every single person that is in contact with student understands that this is a place in which students are affirmed, and that these are students that are going to be seen and are going to be heard from every aspect of every touch point that they see, from the cafeteria to the parking, the parking lot crew. Everyone should be on the same page of making sure that students feel seen and heard in real time, because affirming identities without action falls very, 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 very short of inclusivity. And I will be the first one to say that and to believe in it. And that brings me to the end. I want to thank you all so much for engaging with me with purpose. Thank you for coming to the workshop. I do have some information and some surveys. Follow me on LinkedIn, follow me on IG. I have several arsenal of workshops, if you will, that I go around, and I do travel and speak, whether it be to students, girls and boys, but I do primarily speak to guest speaker for girls empowerment, leadership, students of color, PDs, organizations, you name it. I've been there. Conferences, seminars. I enjoy them all. Thank you all so much for coming and for participating, or for those that are just listening. I do hope that everything that I have said has made some sort of motion in your heart and in your brain, that you all will implement some of these things. And if you want to share with me any feedback, there is going to be a survey that is going to be coming out. Please, I believe in feedback, not just looking at it, but also processing it and making sure that I can do better in any type of way. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And I will turn it back over to Ms. Chloe.
Thank you, Alexis. It's just such a great session. I am really thankful to everyone that made time in their busy school day to be here today. And once again, Alexis, we really appreciate your time. So, all right. Bye, everyone.